NPR has just dropped a new brutal election bombshell on Donald Trump and RFK Jr. And this is some really bad news for both of them that might cost Donald Trump the election. Now we'll take a look at that in a second, but first I wanted to quickly touch on the fact that RFK Jr. has found a position in Trump's transition team. So let's quickly take a look at this article to find out more. Trump adds RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard to his transition team as he recruits supporters from across partisan lines. Now, I wouldn't exactly call this across partisan lines, because if both RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard were former Democrats now voting Republican, specifically in favor of Trump, then they were never Democrats to begin with. Or if they were, now they're just extremely brainwashed. Because no reasonable person would actually want to vote for Donald Trump. So either A, they're brainwashed, or B, they're expecting a lot of money from this. According to Trump's campaign senior advisor, they are proud that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard have been added to the Trump-Vance transition team, and that they look forward to having their powerful voices on the team as they work to restore America's greatness. And honestly, I think that this is really the only move that Donald Trump can make right now, because he is consistently falling in the polls and consistently becoming less and less popular. So bringing over RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard might bring over some moderates or even potentially some Democrats who are unhappy with Kamala Harris. Although if you're willing to be swayed by these two people, again, I think you're crazy. Because even if you don't like Kamala Harris for whatever reason, Donald Trump is still a billion times worse than her. So in my opinion, if you would rather vote for Trump because of these two candidates, you were never progressive to begin with. So now that we've gone through that, I also want to show you this other bizarre story because it really just adds to the long list of reasons why we don't want RFK Jr. in office. So let's take a look at this. RFK Jr. faces calls for investigation into claim that he chainsawed a whale's head off. Let me just tell you, it gets weirder and weirder with RFK Jr. Each day it feels like. Activists say Kennedy could have committed felony violation for allegedly driving with a whale skull strapped to the roof of the car. His independent White House campaign has fizzled, but the flow of bizarre stories of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s unorthodox handling of the carcasses of wild mammals has experienced no similar suspension. An environmental group is calling for a federal investigation into the former presidential candidate for an episode in which he allegedly severed the head of a washed-up whale with a chainsaw and drove home with it strapped to his car's roof. Who does that? Like, literally, who does that? Nobody. Nobody that I know has ever once thought to do that. And if this story of him driving somewhere with a carcass in his car, or in this case on top of his car, that should be familiar because the episode has parallels with another extraordinary tale reported earlier in August, in which Kennedy confessed to dumping a dead bear cub in New York's Central Park and attempted to make it look like the animal was killed by a bicyclist. Now, this goes on to say that this isn't exactly new because it was from a 2012 interview, but the story's reemergence following the bear tale and other off-the-wall declarations, including claims that part of RFK Jr.'s brain was eaten by worms that had an apparent fondness for barbecued dog. Oh my gosh. How is this real? I'm trying to be serious here, but it's impossible with how insane RFK Jr. is. Anyway, this has angered activists at the Center for Biology Diversity Action Fund. The group previously denounced Kennedy's candidacy, I wonder why, and endorsed Democratic nominee Kamala Harris for president. So now with that bizarre story out of the way, let's move on to this brutal election bombshell that NPR just dropped on Donald Trump and RFK Jr. So let's take a look at this article here. RFK Jr. may be unable to withdraw his name from ballots in some swing states. After spending several months and millions of dollars overcoming onerous requirements to try to get on the ballot in all 50 states, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is now facing new barriers to try to get off the ballot in some states. Last Friday, Kennedy announced that he was effectively ending his independent presidential campaign, encouraging his supporters to vote for him in non-competitive states, but to support Republican Donald Trump in others. Quote, "In about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name, and I've already started that process and urged voters not to vote for me," Kennedy said. But an NPR review finds it may not be possible for Kennedy to remove his name from ballots in the majority of 7 swing states: Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. Every state has different procedures and deadlines with regard to ballot access and withdrawal, but the later a withdrawal happens, the harder it is for a state to remove a name from a ballot, said David Becker, executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. Some states have deadlines that have passed, and many states have already begun the process of printing ballots. So yeah, you'll see people online trying to claim like, oh, they're trying to rig the election or whatever. No, it's just because, this is a process. This takes time. If we're all just pressing a button on our phones, for example, then yeah, it's not that hard to remove a candidate. But there's a ton of processes that this has to go through. And for places that have paper ballots, that is a lot of process to go in and just waste a bunch of paper to remove a candidate's name. And so if these states have deadlines that have already passed, then that is understandable why they couldn't remove the name. Before his announcement, Kennedy's campaign said it had gathered enough signatures to appear on 47 ballots and officially gain access in 22 states. And while the campaign did not specify what states he would seek to leave, below is where things stand in 10 of the closest states in alphabetical order. Of course, it's unclear how many people in a swing state would actually vote for Kennedy should he be unable to remove himself from that state's ballot. So yeah, because Kennedy is most likely going to stay on these 4 states, this is really bad news for Trump and RFK Jr. And this is because even RFK Jr. himself has said that he might accidentally take away some votes from Donald Trump, which Trump will actually really need in these swing states. And honestly, this is just super great to see. You can't just jump through all of the hoops to get on the ballot and then basically be bribed out of the election, because that's pretty much exactly what happened. Like we saw, RFK Jr. now has a job working for Donald Trump, and we saw him before on the phone asking Trump for a job, so it's very clear that he was bribed and was given a job for dropping out. So personally, I think this is the perfect ending for someone who's a complete sellout. Not to mention, he's just super weird. I don't know why he thought he ever had a chance to win in the first place.